Hello everyone. I seem to be having a few technical issues today. I'm just wondering how it's all looking at your end. If someone could put something in the chat, I'm just going to check it on my phone. Because YouTube for some reason doesn't think the video is coming through. So I just thought I'd check and see how things look. So if someone can just leave a comment in the chat, that'd be great. And assuming if it is all working okay, we'll just proceed as normal. Because YouTube for some reason doesn't think... It seems to be working. It's working on my phone. So let's just get into it. I'll carry on. I might be talking into a void, but hopefully everything's okay. Right, welcome to the weekly recap and the market outlook for next week. We do this every Friday at 2:30 normally UK time. Yeah, a bit blurred, someone said. I think hopefully it'll speed up. The speed. I think that's because YouTube thinks it's not getting the screen fast enough, but hopefully it will smooth itself out. So we look at the normal mix of markets that we look at every week. Sorry, I was going to put this on Twitter and I've completely forgot to do that. That we look at every week. So we look at stock indices, commodities, what else? Oil, gold, silver, bit of crypto, bit of FX, all of that sort of stuff. And then once we've looked at those markets, I go into the questions and look at any markets you want looking at. I think it feels like it's been perhaps a bit of an odd week. We've seen stock markets under a bit of pressure. They have bounced back over the last couple of days, but we'll look at all of this as we go through. Let's just do the risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 76.25% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Okay, it all looks okay. I closed out this week one of my biggest winning trades in a few months. We'll take a look at that in a second, that natural gas move. But let's look at the events for next week. I can't remember a week like this where, look at it next week, the big stuff. It's also all interest rate decisions next week. So Wednesday, China interest rate, Japan interest rate, US interest rate in the evening, UK time. And then on Thursday, UK interest rates. I mean, clearly, Bank of England, central bank statements are really closely watched at the moment because of the concerns about inflation. So it would be really interesting to see what some of the chat is or the narrative around these interest rate decisions next week from the central banks. I think we had UK inflation out this week. It was its highest for nearly 10 years. EU inflation in August was at a 10-year high. Central banks continue to say that it's a temporary thing, the inflation. But maybe it ends up being more of a concern. So I think it's really interesting next week that we've got all this inflation data coming out. So let's see, or interest rate decisions from the central banks and what they say, probably more importantly about inflation. Just a quick recap of where to go for stuff. Capital.com is who I'm doing this with today. Of course, we do regular videos throughout the week on our YouTube channel, which you're watching this on now. So if you haven't subscribe to the channel and you get updates. We also have a stock channel. There's a stock analysis from me going up on AMC Entertainment, I think a bit later on today. The link to the stock channel is in the description of this video. To find out more about me, davidjonestrading.com and the training course I run. Any questions after today, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com, and Twitter, @JonesTheMarkets, and of course follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. Right, let's get into it. I thought we'd start with oil this week actually. We'll have a look at oil, we'll have a look at natural gas as well in a minute, because I had that trade on crude oil. I had two trades on oil. So just to explain, this account is a real money account. It's Capital's money, it's not my money. And we started with about £10,000. 2 years ago, and every time I do a video for the YouTube channel, I try and do a trade because I think it makes things a bit more interesting. So there's always a whole mix of trades in here. What trades have we got running at the moment? Or maybe the Brent oil trade has been closed as well. Let me have a quick look because I got stopped out of the short crude trade. Did I get taken out? Oh yeah, it came out of Brent oil yesterday for 400 quid profit and got stopped out for a loss of the short in West Texas crude for a 250 quid loss. So I don't actually have any oil positions on. But I thought it was interesting, crude oil, and it is still interesting because I think we've had this trend off the April lows, April 2020 lows in crude. And it's done a great job all the way up, been a great market all the way up. But since August, it started to fall out of the trend, and I just wondered, was this something of a dead cat bounce? Went short, got stopped out, and the market's pushed a little bit higher since. I think you could make arguments for being long or short crude at the moment. I must admit, I still would be leaning to selling short. Maybe that's a trade we'll do now. Actually, I do wonder if considering oil is up. Is it about 40% this year? I just wonder if perhaps we've seen the best in oil so far this year, for the year so far. I mean, and we've fallen out of the trend and da 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 da. So I do wonder if perhaps we've seen the highs for oil for a bit, those highs that we saw in the summer, and perhaps the best we can hope for now is a somewhat sideways trading market. But actually, let's do a short in oil. I think there's a couple of things here that made me think this might be an interesting trade to do. First of all, those highs from the end of July, 30th of July, ahead of $74. The market is starting to look a little bit nervous over the last couple of days. Ahead of those highs, it's traded as high as 72.90. So for me, that's an interesting place for a stop. And actually, there's these highs here. What are those highs? 74.92. So 74 to 75 might be something of a problem area. For fans of the RSIs and stuff, we have gone overbought on the RSI the last couple of days. So let's see. Let's do the trade. We'll kick off the live stream with a real trade and see how it works out. So I'm going to go short. I think that maybe going into next week we could see the price of oil under pressure. I've got some nice levels up here for stops. So I could go. I think I might go. I could go 74. Let's go 74.50 for a stop. Let's set that trade up. So we're going to go 74.50 for a stop, and just really seeing if this ends up being a bit of a dead cat bounce and we turn down again below 70 next week. Let's see what happens. We normally risk 100 quid on these trades. So if I sell, how many have I got to sell? 47 barrels, where the price is trading now, with a stop at 74.50. Then my risk is about £100 or so. Let's set that trade up. But so that's gone through. So we're short oil at 71.58. Let's see what happens though. But I do think that we have fallen out this trend. There are concerns about the Delta variant. There have been of the coronavirus. So perhaps we have a bit more of a sideways moving market. But I think that's an interesting market to watch next week, crude oil. But I do wonder if we've seen the best for now in crude. Let's see. Now, natural gas. Natural gas was the trade I closed out this week a couple of days ago. Where is it? Absolute great trade in the end, and I did it on my own account as well. So the profit was, it was closed out in a few chunks. So the profit was, what's that, 1,300 quid? About £1,400, something like that, £1,400. And the risk on natural gas was £250. So in terms of return based on risk, absolute great trade that was. But I mean, it went absolutely nuts, isn't it? The price of gas. I mean, who'd have thought it? I remember from last week, there were a lot of people, there were a few people in the chat going short natural gas at just above 5, which I mean, I wouldn't have done it because the trend was still up, but I didn't think we were going to come into this week and see the thing jump up again another, what was it, 12% or so this week. So, we've had this, I think as someone said in the chat, a parabolic move in the price of natural gas. And there's been a few things. I think I did a video on it about a week ago on the channel. There's a few things. There is a supply-demand imbalance a little bit. Supply is pretty tight. I think European inventories of natural gas were at a 10-year low. So we do have a bit of an imbalance on the supply side. I'm out of all my trades now in natural gas, but for me, I'd still be looking to be a buyer of natural gas. Hopefully it will sell off a bit more from here, but looking at that trend since April, this is a great argument of going with the trend in a market. So I've traded it, I think, 3 times since April. My last entry point was here, I think, in August, late July, early August. So it ended up being a good trade. But we've got a lot of support. That trend line's coming in around about 390. That's a long way away from where we are now. It's about 20% lower than where we are now. But we've got lots of pockets of support on the way up. So for me, I think that's an interesting market to watch next week, just because of the crazy moves we've seen. If we flip it over to a short-term chart. So for me, lots of levels for placing stops on the way back if it does sell off. I think we've got big support coming in the 485 area, 480 to 5, I should say. And I wonder if 5 ends up being something of a psychological level for the price of natural gas. So for me, it has been a crazy few weeks for natural gas, but I'd still be looking to be a buyer of dips. The trend is still up. So for me, I wouldn't be going short because the trend is still up. But who knows? No one's got a crystal ball. But an interesting market to watch next week. Right. I can see there's a few questions coming in for stuff to look at. We will look at that. I will look at the questions when I've been through our usual markets. All right. So natural gas and oil, interesting markets for different reasons. Perhaps oil has turned in the last few weeks, and natural gas, a bit of a pullback, but the trend is still strong. Stock markets are interesting. I think S&P 500, and I know, I say the same thing every week on the S&P. The trend is up. You're going to be a buyer of dips. The dip the trend is still, if I just change this trend line a little bit to look, I don't know, like that. That trend for me is still up. Well, it's not just up, it is up, but the sell-off we've been through, which again is not that much of a move. The market has gone from 45.50 to as low as 44.40. So we lost 110 points since that 6th of September high. So in percentage terms, what's that? About almost 3%, not quite 3%. So a 3% fall in stocks, in stock market index is nothing, is it? But actually, it is probably the biggest sell-off we've seen since July. So 2 months, because this market has been so strong. Even a relatively small move like that is quite a drastic one. And for me, I'd still be a buyer, but I think if it starts breaking below 44.40 today or next week, perhaps we will see a bit of a pause for stock markets. Again, for me, that trend is still up, and I think only if we slipped below, it's only the low from a month ago, the August lows around 43.50, would I worry that perhaps we're going to get a deeper sell-off. So it has been a relatively big sell-off by the standards of the last couple of months or so, but I would still be expecting this market to bounce back, and I'd only start getting worried about the trend ending if it starts breaking below 43.50. So we'll see what happens next week, but for me it's a buying opportunity, but let's see how it works out. Let's take a look at the Nasdaq. So the Nasdaq 100, I don't think it's sold off in percentage terms quite as much, but let's take a look. So the Nasdaq dropped from, 15,700 down to, what was the low? 15,300, not much at all, is it? 4 points. So I suppose again it's still 2.5% fall. But that trend in the Nasdaq is still up. So again, for me, I wouldn't be worrying about the market crashing. I'd be thinking about where can I get in and where's my stop loss going to go. I think for short-term traders, this 15,250 level is quite an interesting one. It was the sort of highs here and a bit of a short-term low end of August. Much bigger support on the Nasdaq back 14,450, that sort of area. So again, for me, only if we started breaking below there, which is almost 1,000 points below where we are now, would I start to worry this trend is over. I can't remember if we still actually have a Nasdaq trade running. Yes, we do. I think it's probably the biggest winner at the moment, now that natural gas trade's gone. So here's the Nasdaq trade from the 8th of July at 14.6, just about, and that's up £860. So that's up about, again, slightly more, 3.5 times the risk taken. So for now, I'm still happy to run that trade, and the trend for me on the Nasdaq is still definitely up. But let's see, maybe markets are getting a bit nervous because of the inflation concerns. That's why I think it will be an interesting week next week when we get all that interest rate decision stuff coming out and what they say. Now the FTSE's been the FTSE sort of doing its own thing a bit. When US markets go down, it feels like the FTSE exaggerates the sell-off, and when US markets go up, the FTSE doesn't go up as much. But again, if we go back to the basics of the trend, this is a trend I picked up from whenever, for most of this year, that trend is still up. So for me, I'd still be a buyer of the FTSE. I think we've got big support at 6.8, so a couple of 100 points below where we are now. I don't think for me, it's not the best index to trade. I'd always lead towards the S&P 500. But interesting that we are still within that trend. You can see it's interesting how 7,000 has been quite the psychological support over the last couple of weeks or so. Let's just take a look at it on the short-term chart. There we go. So you can see the market just bumbling around 7,000 and snaps back off it. It's currently only 20 or so points above that, so it might be an interesting afternoon. Let's see what happens. Next one we look at is the DAX, so the German market. The DAX is changing, isn't it? I must admit I haven't read, but I've just seen a few headlines. It's not going to be the DAX 30, it's going to be the DAX 40. I'll try and do a bit more research on that, but I presume they're trying to broaden out perhaps the split of companies in there and who does what exactly, but I don't know. So the DAX, we did look at it. I remember this from last week, that it had sort of fallen out of its trend, the DAX. If we looked something like that, I think I remember from a week ago, it had fallen out of its trend, and it has been a bit sideways over the last month compared to US markets. Lots of support from 14.8 through to about 15,000. But it does feel a bit lackluster, I suppose, at the moment. Be interesting to see what happens. But for me, if US markets recover from where we are now, you'd expect the DAX to get dragged up by it as well. But it does look, I think, a little bit weak at the moment. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And then the Nikkei. I haven't looked at this one all week. Let's take a look at that, because we saw that crazy move in the Nikkei in August. And here we are. The Nikkei went from August lows below 27,000, which was pretty much the lowest it had been all year, and then it's traded just about this week, moved out to fresh highs for the year. So massive turnaround for the Nikkei. I think I said a few times, it's my oldest trade at the moment is one I've got on the Nikkei, and I think it's from December or January, something like that. And I'm still in the trade, and it's gone nowhere. I nearly got stopped out here, and I'm just wondering if it can hold up here. I think that clearly there have been political reasons why the Nikkei's done well, but if it holds up here, are we going to see even further gains? So for me, I think there's a couple of ways of playing this. If you're going to go short now, you've got an obvious place for the stop. Well, I would have anyway, and that would be above the highs for the week, so above 30,800. For me, if it gets to 31,000, I'm getting stopped out of silver. You can see it down there, bottom left corner, getting stopped out of my least favourite market. If it breaks above 31,000, perhaps we've got a breakout trade on, and we can start looking at much more aggressive targets for the Nikkei. But it's been a strange old year, but an interesting market to watch next week. But for me, as usual, the market I would be watching is the S&P 500. Let's just see. Is stuff moving around a bit? Let's have a quick look. It's quite weak again, the S&P, isn't it? I mean, it could be an interesting market to watch today. Let's have a look at the... it's getting a bit clobbered in the current hour. I mean, we did see... This is the hourly chart we're looking at now. So we're looking at the slide from the 6th of September. And it has, over recent days, tried to make a base, or has made a base. around 44.40. We're currently 44.56. It could be an interesting one to watch this afternoon to see if we're going to get a bounce ahead of that level. It's pretty weak at the moment, but let's see. I think that could be an interesting one to watch for the rest of the session. I've got to stop saying interesting, haven't I? So there we go. There's stocks. Bit of a mixed picture, but I think these trends for me are still holding. Let's take a look at the silver and gold. I did a silver video this week, and I think looking for the rest of the year for silver. And I often say on these live streams, I think it's probably my least favourite market, silver and gold, this year. Because look at it, it's a sideways market. We're trading now on silver at $22.50. Trading at levels, trading where we were basically July last year, or this time last year, September the 23rd last year. So I think it's an interesting one. It really struggles to hold on to any rallies at the moment. We had that flash crash in silver in August, the 8th of August. We have seen a floor for the price, 21.60, 21.50. So only $1 below where we are now. If it's going to bounce from anywhere, we'd expect a bit of strength. So that could be one market to watch next week. Like I say, I'm not a fan of silver because I think you have so many markets out there this year that have been in such great trends. Natural gas is an extreme example. I really don't want to trade a market that's going sideways. But let's see what happens next week. Let's see if we see 21.50 hold and see what happens. I think if it starts breaking below 21.50, we could see, because silver is a bit of a weird market. I mean, when it starts moving, it really does move sometimes. I wonder if we see it, if it breaks below 21.50, do we see a much deeper sell-off for the price of silver? But for me at the moment, I'll be waiting to see if there's any strength coming in. But I'm only saying that theoretically because I'm not going to trade it because I hate it. Let's have a look at gold. I think we did a video on gold yesterday, and it was an outlook for gold for the rest of the year. And a bit like silver, if you go back to August of last year, gold was hitting all-time highs, trading up to $2,075 an ounce. And I thought we'd have a lot more momentum this year for the price of gold. And again, look at it. We just got sideways to slightly down market in gold at the moment. So for me, looking at that, I'd have absolutely no interest in trading that at these levels. There's that flash crash in August again. Again, I think if it gets whacked down towards 1700, then it starts to look interesting. Again, looking to see if the old support holds. But just a bit of a directionless mess. I said in the videos for gold and silver, it almost feels like, if investors want to embrace risk and trends, there's stock markets have done incredibly well over the last 12 months. If they want to look at alternative stuff, clearly crypto has done well and had lots of volatility. And it almost feels like everyone's forgotten about gold and silver this year. It's sort of fallen between the cracks. And I just think we just had this bit of a directionless mess of a year. If we went back to the 3-year trend on gold, that 3-year trend is up still. So, arguably from a longer term point of view, the long-term trend is up. So longer term could be looking to be a buyer. Let's see. But for me, it's just a bit of a nothing market, really. But let's see if we get pushed down a bit next week and what happens down at this 1660, if 1660 to 1680, but not the most interesting of markets for me at the moment. What should we look at next? We look at some FX pairs. Again, I think these have been a bit of a mixed bag, you could say, this year. If we look at pound against the dollar, for a lot of this year, pretty sideways market, pound against the dollar. Lots of support down at 135.50 through to 136.50. I think the last couple of months have been a bit of a non-event. If I was going to do a trade at the moment, what would I do? Let's flip things over to an hourly chart and see what this looks like. I suppose there's an argument for being a buyer in the short term. Should we have a look? Let's have a look and see if we picked up on the 20th of August to where we are now. Okay, so it's thinking about sort of falling out of that trend, but whenever stuff falls out of a trend, I'm tempted to give it one more chance. And I think again, for me, if I was a buyer now, I'd put my stop perhaps the other side of 137.20. So maybe we get a bit of chop here, but perhaps next week we see more of a recovery. Let's do that trade. So these old lows were around 137.26. Let's try and take advantage of this weakness and take the view that perhaps the market is overreacting to something. So we'll go 137 for a stop, just down there. So you can see it on the chart there. So if it gets down to there, I will be stopped out. And we'll do, what should we do? We'll do £100 risk as usual. So we're going to buy 18,000. Clearly it's a margin trade, so I'll put up £600 in this example. Buy it. There we go. Did I buy it? There we go. Yeah, bought at 137.76. Let's see. I don't know if that's a trade I'd do with my own money, but let's see. Let's see what happens. See if we get a bit of a snapback. So that's that. Euro against the dollar. Let's take a look at that. You know, maybe we are seeing these markets shift in sentiment. You know, no trend goes on forever, and maybe we are seeing a shift. Let's see. We'll know a bit more next week, won't we? I do think that for me, I am thinking about being a buyer. I think I do have a trade on the euro actually. So I am long the euro at the moment, and I'm just wondering if we're going to see this whole 116, the lows from September last year. So it's a 12-month low, 116 to sort of 117 area, be something of a zone of support for euro US dollar. But again, I'd have to say, if you look at what we're looking at here, the last 12 months or so, we're pretty sideways. Reasonable range. You know, we've got, what is it, about a 700 point range here, but pretty directionless again. And I think for me, I struggle to trade directionless markets, so I'd much rather trade something that was moving. But again, with the euro, let's see, do we see something of a bounce back coming next week ahead of this old support, these old lows? Or do we start to break down again? If we break down, we'll be at the lowest since July of last year, and perhaps we see a new trend downwards starting. So not the most exciting market, again, over the last few months or so, I think, euro against the US dollar. So let's see. Let's see what happens. Cryptos. Look at the cryptos. I think I came out with the trades, actually. I don't think I've got any trades on cryptos in here. No, nothing on cryptos. I think there were a couple of trades on hang on a second, Ethereum and Bitcoin, and I think they got closed somewhere. Oh, there you go, 7th of September. So they got Bitcoin and Ethereum trades closed. So they did okay. I think though, I haven't looked at them for a couple of days, but I think I'd be inclined still to be a buyer. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at Bitcoin. Yeah. So there's Bitcoin. So I think that trend has gone. So let's take that off. But for me, I think it's still positive. You know, we'd had the top of the old range around 42,000. Broke out through that in August, and it ran as high as almost 53,000. Again, lost a chunk of momentum over the last couple of weeks. I would still be inclined to be a buyer. Maybe wouldn't buy today, but I just wonder if this old support, wherever it is, just in here, there we go, down at 42, let's call it 42,500. If I was a buyer now, I would want my stop the other side of that level. So let's see what happens with that one, but a little bit boring. But for me, the bias is still up. And if we have a look at Ethereum, I'm guessing it's not going to look wildly different, is it? Oh, there we go. So again, in Ethereum, that trend, that run higher, we've lost some momentum. But again, for me in Ethereum, big support from 2,850 through to 3,000. So again, if we saw it a bit weaker into next week, clearly it's selling off a bit today, then interesting to see what happens if we push back to those lows again. Oh, I saw someone mention Litecoin. There was that tweet, wasn't there? It was a fake tweet in the end that someone said Walmart, the US clearly retail giant, we're going to start accepting Litecoin, but it ended up being fake. So you can see the spike. I think it move 25%. There you go. Cryptos are crazy, aren't they? So we went from 175 to, this isn't in an hour, up to 234. So what's that? 60. Is it in dollars? $60 move. So yeah, 30% move. 30%. Yeah, 30% and a bit more. And then bang, back down again. So it's going to be a bit of a mess on the chart for that one, isn't it, really? So, but again, you could argue, you know, with Litecoin that the trend is still up. You know, you've got lots of support at 160 on Litecoin. I haven't looked at the long-term chart of this for years and years, but yeah. Well, how high did it get back there? Was that 2017? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so for me, the trend is still up. Lots of support at 160. So I think the cryptos are still broadly positive. Perhaps some of that excitement has gone from the last few weeks, but for me, still broadly positive. Right, I saw someone mention copper actually, so let's take a look at copper, and then we'll jump into some of the others. Copper, yeah, because I think I've got there's a few trades on copper. You can see them here. One I'm losing 63, and one I'm up 69 quid. So for me, that trend is still up. I think when we looked at it last week, I think I said the same thing. We sort of sharp move, didn't we? Was it a week ago? Yeah. So for me, copper, it feels like it is still just about hanging on to that trend, copper. So a bit of a scrappy week, but I'd only change my mind if it broke below the lows from the 19th of August. So the 19th of August low was about 396. So for me, as long as it stays there, above there, that trend is still just about up. But again, I'd have to say, not the most exciting market, is it? You know, we're trading pretty much where we were in June. So we've seen a lot of noise over the last 3 months, but no real direction, really. So, but for me, that trend still just about up in copper. But if we started breaking below the August lows, I think I'd change my mind on that one. So we'll see. Let me jump into some of the questions and try and answer them. Let's see. Paladin. Is that a stock, Paladin? Or did you mean to type Palladium? We'll have a look at Palladium anyway. Is that Paladin there? Paladin Energy. Okay. Where does this trade? Australia. We don't have that much data, do we? It's one of those where we don't have a lot of data. I don't know why, whether it only just came to the market or we just haven't got the data. So for me, the trend is clearly up, isn't it? But I always hate these ones that double, you know, in a couple of weeks. So for me, the trend is up. If I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer. But I think it's difficult to make too much sense of it when we don't have that much data. You know, if you're looking at the RSI, you'd say, well, it's really overcooked up here. But the RSI has been overbought since the beginning of September, and the stock has still doubled, hasn't it? So it's a tricky one for me. That trend is still up. If I was in it, you know, a bit like the natural gas trade, where they go parabolic, I'd be dragging up a stop loss behind it. If I had to buy it today, the closest I want my stop would probably be the other side of 75 for me personally, which is a long way away. You know, it's 25% and more away from where it is now. So always a tricky one, those. Whitehaven. What's Whitehaven? It rings a bell, that one, but let's have a look at it. Whitehaven. We haven't. Yes, we have. Australian one again. Another Australian one again, in a new flow. What do they do? These companies? Oh, coal. Okay, Whitehaven Coal. Again, I think that's probably we've only just started gathering the data. I think, or offering it, and that's why I've not got much data. But again, for me, a bit like the one we just looked at, Paladin. The trend is up. Big move today. But if we saw that weaken a bit more into next week, I think, you know, 2.4 could be interesting. The old highs, the idea that the old resistance becomes support and all of that sort of thing. So if we saw it under a bit more pressure from here, for me, I'd still be looking to be a buyer because that trend is still up, isn't it? So we'll see. We'll see. Euro Swiss franc. That's I'm a bit more familiar with those. Euro chuff. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, that's really has. I remember this. I think I went short this the other week and we got stopped out. That doesn't look like that. That does look like it's turning the corner, doesn't it? Or has arguably turned the corner. It's an interesting market to watch, that one. So we had this. Let's just get rid of that for a sec. We had this trend that had been in place since when was it? March of this year, and breaking out through the trend line. Again, I would probably thinking about going short here, but the fact it's broken higher again these last couple of days through 109, I would be thinking about being a buyer. And the only question is, where does your stop loss go, or where would my stop loss go? Let's flip this over to an hourly chart. What does it look like? I mean, that is a great trend since whenever it is, August, isn't it? So if we pick up on that, just hold on a second. So if I was a buyer now, I'd probably rather wait for the dip. The risk is, of course, you don't get the dip. But if I was trying to catch a bigger move higher, I would want my stop down here somewhere below these old lows, 108.20, something like that. You know, a more aggressive stop could be in here, just below the breakout point. You know, but for me, I think that is, when a lot of currencies are quite boring at the moment, that is an interesting one for next week. That one, Euro Swiss. So yeah, interesting one to watch, I think. But it does look like perhaps it's turned the corner, and we're going to see a bit more recovery. Right, Suncor. Let's have a look at Suncor. Hold on a second. Is it another Australian group? Why are these? Hang on a second. Suncor FPO. Let's have a look. Lots of Aussie ones today. Again, I think perhaps we only started offering Aussie stocks earlier this year, or some of these Aussie stocks anyway, because all the data all starts from the same point. Again, the trend is up, isn't it? So for me, the trend is up. I wonder if it will be under a bit more pressure next week. It will be interesting if it starts nudging back towards 12 again. I mean, 12 was a bit of a turning point after that gap up. But for me, still looking to be a buyer of dips. If Alibaba goes lower than 130, where are the support levels after that? Let's have a look. Is that one still getting hit? Let's have a look at that. I've looked at that for a while. I mean, it has been a heck of a downtrend, this Alibaba stock, isn't it? We've looked at it quite regularly, but you know, that trend is still down. I think I do remember the other week wondering if we would see it start to form a base down here. For me, it would still be too early to buy because the trend is still down. But we have, at least over the last 3 weeks, it hasn't made a new low. It came back to that low and it's held. So for me, maybe we'll see it start to build a base. But your question was if it goes below 130. If it goes below 130, which is these old lows here, I mean, for me, I'll be looking for 100. You know, I think we could see, you know, quite the sharp sell-off. But, you know, we do have a few little support levels before that. You know, 147-ish from May 2019, then that 130 level you mentioned. So for me, it's an interesting but a do nothing for me at the moment because that trend is still down. But I think perhaps it's the fact that it hasn't moved to a new low for a few weeks. Are we seeing the selling run out of steam? Let's see. When I sell, it goes up. When I buy, it goes down. When I both sell and buy, I don't quite answer that. I mean, when I sell high, it goes up. When I buy high, it goes down. I think, I'm not quite sure. I mean, trading is difficult, you know, and it'd be interesting over what number of trades you did that. I did actually looked at some of my own trading yesterday for something else, and over the last, since 2019, May 2019, in my own account, I've done just over 300 trades. And out of 300 trades, my success rate is about 61%. Yeah, so let's say 4 out of 10 trades are going to be losers. Yeah, so don't be surprised if your experience of trading is having lots of losing trades, you know, because it's not easy. So so for me, you know, I do buy when something's going up. I do buy when the price is high, as with natural gas, for example. But I think, you know, and it depends also how tight your stop losses are. You know, I'm always quite happy to give the market a bit of room to move around. And I think if perhaps your stop losses are too tight, you will be experiencing even more losses than you'd expect. So there's not too much I can add to that. Maybe drop me an email and we'll have a conversation about it. In your opinion, what would be the trend for coffee in the long term since there's no major changes in Brazil's situation? I am long coffee, and I had a good trade on it earlier in the summer. I do wonder if it might go a bit boring now, but you're right. We had all that stuff. We had a drought in Brazil, first of all, didn't we? Then there was freezing temperatures, which freezer burned some of the crops. and that was what caused that again short-term parabolic type move in July. So I was in for that and got out, but I'm back in again from, I don't know, here somewhere, wherever it is now. I mean, for me, that trend in coffee is still up. And I bought in wondering, was it going to take off again? And it hasn't. You know, if I didn't have a trade on, probably I'd be happier sitting on my hands and seeing if we get a bit of a sell-off, perhaps down towards 1.5 again. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I'm long already, so who knows? But for me, that trend is still up in coffee, but perhaps it just goes a bit sideways from here. You know, but I'd still rather be a buyer than a seller in coffee at the moment, based on that historical trend, which goes back a bit further, because it does have this fairly big sideways range for a long time, doesn't it? So it's not guaranteed to carry on its trend, but for me that trend is still just about up. So let's see. We did gold. Oh, hang on a second. Sorry. There's a lot of gold fans in today, isn't there? Hang on a second. What's gold doing now? For me, it's just it's getting. Oh, it's not. It's still within yesterday's range, isn't it? We did a copper. The Bitcoin, Aussie dollar. I think the Aussie dollar is a short. I've got a short on at the moment myself for the New Zealand dollar against the US dollar. And the Aussie dollar been a great market, great on the way up. Australian dollar against the US dollar from wherever that was, March last year. So a great run on the way up. But I definitely think that since March, April this year, we've seen a change in trend. So for me, I would be happier being short the Aussie dollar, so against the US dollar, and it's almost textbook. I did notice, I looked at it yesterday, almost a textbook move back to the trend line around about 74.50. So for me, if I was going short now, I would probably still want my stop above 74.50. So let's see, and my target would be at least for a run back to 7100 on the Aussie dollar. US dollar. I mean, we've got a lot of support down here from September of last year, so from a year ago, around about, around 70.7, something like that. But for me, that trend is still just about down. What type of account do you have, as crypto is not available in the UK? Correct. So this account, the Capital account I use for videos, because I do videos on crypto, I've got crypto enabled on this account, and because clearly the people who watch our videos aren't just in the UK. But you're right, in my own Capital account I can't trade cryptos for me as a person, because it's banned in the UK, leverage trading on cryptos. So we looked at that. Oh yeah, China and Hong Kong. Let's have a look at the China A50. We looked at that the week, the China A50. What's it been doing? I do wonder, is it trying to make a base here? I think that was pretty much what I would have said last time round. Because we had these old lows from back here. It did poke through them. If I had to do a trade, I'd be a buyer, is what I would say. I think, putting it in a nutshell, seeing if we're seeing the market trying to make a base here. I suppose if I went with the trend, is that trend still down? If we picked up on the latest trend. Perhaps I should be a bit more patient. But I think it's quite interesting that over the last 6 weeks or so, it has held above 14,500. So let's see. And in terms of, we've got a bit of, bullish divergence going on the RSI as well. So I think it's an interesting one, that word again, interesting market down here. And the risk reward is good. If I was a buyer at 15,150, with a stop at 14,000, for example, so put a stop loss 1,100 points away. If it goes back up to where it was in May, it's like 3,000 points upside for 1,000 or so risk. So I think it's an interesting one here. If it broke below 14.5, I would completely change my sort of bullish view on it and think that, well, actually maybe the trend is still down. But that's quite the price action on that. I think perhaps we are seeing something of a bottom being built. Just a quick reminder of the contacts: to open an account, download the app, have a demo account, have access to all the stuff you've looked at today. Go to Capital.com. DavidJonesTrading.com for details on me and the training course that I run, which is a pre-recorded training course and then 3 live sessions that we do. David.jones@Capital.com. Any questions? At Jones the Markets on Twitter, and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Right, let's jump back in. Euro Swiss, yeah, we looked at that. Apple, yeah, let's have a look at Apple. Because they got hit a bit, didn't they, on, I can't remember. Was it to do with something with the store? I'd still be a buyer, I think. I think we still got a trade on Apple. Hang on a second. Yeah, from the 5th of March. Buying at 119.70. Again, maybe there's a few things breaking trends at the moment, isn't there? I would personally still be tempted to be a buyer, even though it's just fallen out of the trend line, and put a stop loss the other side of 140. I probably wouldn't buy it today because it's still weak, but another one to perhaps keep an eye on next week. Maybe we are seeing these stocks running out of momentum. You know, maybe we are seeing the last quarter of the year might be a bit trickier than the last 15, 16 months has been for stock markets. But for me, you know, it was only 2 weeks ago it hit all-time highs again, Apple. So you know, there's a lot of momentum there. Let's see where this sell-off ends. See what happens. Yeah, we looked at WTI, we looked at crude oil. Yeah, so that will be, once this is finished, the live thing, you can look back at the you can watch it as a recording. So we actually did a trade on oil. That trade on oil, how's that doing? Short oil. Oh, it's in all right. So we went short at 71.58. It's 71.22. So that was all right so far. Palantir Technologies. Palantir. We looked at those, didn't we? We looked at those quite regularly, actually. Big data, isn't it? Big data. It's I think I did do a video of this on the stocks channel for Capital about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. I think that looks quite bullish to me. You know, we've been in this sort of sidewaysy range since March of this year, and it's breaking out, isn't it? So we're breaking out through. Let's just zoom things in a bit. The highs from around about here, so 27.50, let's say. And we're breaking out, so perhaps we're seeing the start of a new trend. So for me, I might not buy the breakout, but I'd probably quite happily buy a pullback. So that's another interesting one for next week. Platinum. Let's have a look at platinum and palladium. I don't think I've got any trades left on platinum. I think I got stopped out with one the other week. It's just pretty weak, isn't it? I did wonder if we were going to see a bit of strength come back in ahead of 1,000, and we're not. So the trend is down. I think it's a good lesson, this, and Palladium as well, is not to get sort of married to one side of the market, because platinum had been a good market for me earlier this year, because we had a run from 850 in November to above 1,300 in Feb, and it's just turned back, and here we are on platinum. We set new lows for the year this week on platinum. So for me, it still looks weak. You know, we've got a lot of support coming up ahead of 800. So for me, the trend is down on platinum. That's quite the shift I think we've seen over the last 4 months in the price of platinum. Let's take a look at palladium. I think it's a similar sort of thing. I mean, palladium, I was thinking about buying palladium this week, but again, that logically I shouldn't, and I think again it's important not to get too obsessed with one market. Again, a great run this year from March into here, all-time highs that was, I think, 3,000 for palladium, and it's dropped 30% since then. So that hasn't worked very well. So for me, that's still pretty weak. Lots of support on palladium, running from 1750 through to 1800. So, it's for me. I do keep an eye on it every week, but still looks pretty weak. Let's see if it can make some sort of a base down there. So let's see. Dollar. Hang on a second. Dollar Canada. Dollar Canadian dollar. I do have a trade for myself on dollar Canadian dollar. Okay. And I'm long. But let's have a look. Because I do think it. I mean, for me, the thinking behind it was it's turned a bit like that Euro Swiss chart that we looked at. There we go. So for me, I'm long. I think we have seen a reversal in the dollar against the Canadian dollar throughout this summer. It did hit a new high for the recovery in August. So for me, I'd be happy. I mean, I'm happy to stay long, but I'd happy to be a buyer on dips. So, 124 to 125 has been good support over the last 2 months or so. So for me, it's an interesting one to see if we get further dollar strength from here and see what happens. Let's see. The Aussies are up drinking. Yeah, it is late there, isn't it? Alibaba, we looked at that. What about the options all coming today? Oh yeah, is it triple or quadruple witching day today? I must admit, I don't pay that much attention to that stuff anymore. That could well be why we are seeing. It's the expiry of the September contracts, isn't it? So that would pointed out. So that could well be why we're seeing a bit of volatility on the US stock markets. I would be a buyer now, though. We do that trade. Let's do a trade on the S&P. Hold on, let's flip it over to an hourly chart. Perhaps it's all out of the way now. So the trade I'm going to do, I'm going to take the view that the market over the last couple of days has bottomed out. The low is 44.38 over the last couple of days. So I'm going to be a buyer with a stop at 44.30. So let's do that. Let's do that trade. What did I say? 44.30. So if I buy 7 with a stop at 44.30 gives me a risk of about £96. That'll do. Let's do that. Let's see what happens. But I think you're right. I think I'm guessing a lot of that volatility today was to those contracts, those options expiring. But let's see if it carries on tonight. Let's see what happens. The dollar index. Yeah, I forgot about that. Let's have a look at the dollar index. DXY. I think we do have a trade on the dollar index. Oh, there we go. Right from way back, the 28th of May. I think that was in a live stream actually. The 28th of May. Bought at 90.22 and the market's currently 93.05. Dollar index. It's having a good day today. I do have my own. I was thinking about adding to it this week actually, because it's been a bit of a scrappy year for the dollar index, but that was the high in March of last year. I think we've seen it build this base in January and May this year, and I'd rather be a buyer than a seller. Probably the closest I'd want my stop at the moment is the other side of 91.50, which is still 150 points away from where it is now. I think if we break above that high, that 93.50 high, perhaps we'll see a bit more momentum. So, perhaps a little bit frustrating to trade, but I do wonder if it has turned the corner this year, and clearly it's having a good day today. Let's see what happens. Oh, Virgin Galactic. I did actually on our stocks channel we looked at Virgin Galactic this week. So for something a bit more in-depth stuff, go and have a look on our stocks channel. But I do wonder if all the excitement's over for now in Virgin Galactic. For now, because we've got, we had clearly the approval from the FAA. I think it was that May, June. Then we had that test flight in June with Richard Branson on board. The stock touched 60 and is more than halved since then. And I think it feels like a very event news-driven stock, and with not much news coming, perhaps we'll just see flat trading. But historically, down at the big support, it's a long way away, but down at about 14, big support, with it trading at 25 at the moment. If I had to buy it, I'd put a stop the other side of 22, perhaps. But I do wonder if we've seen a lot of that volatility has gone. Have you heard of Zircoin? No. It's fluctuated widely and I'm not familiar with it. I don't know. No. Do you know what? I've never heard of that. Let's have a look. I don't even know if we cover it, but let's have a look. I mean, there are so many of these, aren't there? We don't cover it, so no. How do you think what's going on in Afghanistan and the more recent Aussie, US, UK alliance is going to impact the markets? I don't know if it will. To be perfectly honest, I don't know how much of an impact that would have or where it would impact markets. So, clearly political things do have an impact on markets. I'm just not sure if they will, and the market hasn't reacted. When the withdrawal from Afghanistan started a few weeks, or we had that deadline, we didn't see much of a market reaction. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to have an impact personally. What else have we got? Coffee. Yeah, we looked at coffee. Invesco Solar Etf. Hang on. What's it called again? TAN. What a great name for the ETF. Oh, it's not there. Invesco Solar. There it is. So the fund seeks to track the investment results of the MAC Global Solar Energy Index. At least 90% of its assets. Blah 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 blah. Okay. What do you think? Wow, that's a great run, wasn't it? Great run from March of last year, where it was, is it quoted in dollars? Yeah, $21 to $120. Amazing. And a little bit boring since then, isn't it? A little bit boring. So for me, I wouldn't do anything. But I suppose if you had to do something, you could argue that it looks a bit like ARK investment, actually. You could argue I'd be a buyer, perhaps, but some of the shine has gone away from that one. It feels like, doesn't it? A little bit sideways. That one. What do you think about uranium stocks? I must admit, I do see that get mentioned quite often, but never look at them. I did see that the price has gone nuts again, hasn't it? Over the last, or this week. But Cameco, the one you mentioned, or Cameco, whatever, has exposure to uranium. Never a good thing. Again, it's been a massive move, from $20 to $34 since August. For me, I'd rather wait to see if the dust settles and see if things calm down. But if you're in it, it's great to get a move like that. The only problem I have when we have those crazy moves is where to put your stop loss. For me, I'd be looking at the old breakout area above $26 perhaps as where to put my stop. But I'd rather things calm down a bit. So always a difficult one, I think, to call. Cisco, I've got a trade open on Cisco in my own account. Let's have a quick look and see what it looks like. Oh, hang on, it's just suddenly decided to die. Oh, there we go. Cisco. I'm getting that message off YouTube again that it's not working. Okay, hang on. Hold on a second. Oh, there we go. Now, Cisco's had a great, just the end of the week feeling, isn't it? Oh. And the stream stopped as well. Okay, I'm assuming everything's okay. So there's Tesla. There's our Tesla trend, and that trend is still up. For me, it was a great opportunity back in May. I think that's when we bought it for the trade, when it was bubbling around $550, $600. So that trend is still up. The old highs might be a problem at $782. So only $30 higher from where we are now. So we'll see. But for me, the trend in Tesla is still up, even if it. If I didn't have the trade on and it got knocked back to 600 from here, I'd still be looking at being a buyer. So let's see what happens. Right, guys and girls, I think we are going to wrap it up. I think my PC's had enough. So apologies if I didn't get to your question. We'll do it all again next week. If you have any questions about trading, drop me an email. But of course, to find out more about Capital, go to Capital.com. You can trade all the markets we looked at today. Find out more about me and the training course, go to davidjonestrading.com. Any questions, drop me an email at Capital.com and follow me on Twitter at JonesTheMarkets. And of course, follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. And in the description of today's stream is the link to our stocks channel. So take a look at that for US stocks. Right, we'll wrap things up there. Thanks very much for coming along. Sorry about the odd little glitch along the way, but hopefully most of it ran okay. And see you next week.